Lately, I've been sitting with this idea that if truth has no finish line, something I've thought about before, then maybe it also has no fixed age. It's not a statue we polish once and call it done. It's not a trophy we lock in a case and own forever. It's more like something alive, something that's asking things of us. I keep coming back to this image, truth as a plant that you love. You don't just stick it in the ground and demand it bloom on your schedule. You learn its needs. You notice when the light's too harsh or the roots are getting crowded. You water it even when nothing seems to be happening above the soil. And you wait, not passively but attentively, because you know growth has its own timing. You're not trying to force the flower, you're trying to create the conditions where flowering becomes possible. That's how I've started imagining our relationship with truth. Not as owners, but as gardeners. Not as discoverers who've arrived, but as caretakers of something still becoming. And if truth is alive like that, then it's also vulnerable. It can be nurtured or neglected. It can be guided toward wisdom or twisted into something distorted, depending on how we handle it. Each generation inherits not a finished product, but a kind of stewardship. Partial clarity, yes, but also the responsibility to protect what we've been given from simplification, from manipulation, from the kinds of misuse that happen when we treat living things like objects. This isn't a new insight, of course. Lots of traditions have been onto this for a long time. The rabbis of Mishnah, for instance, talked about making a fence around the Torah. I used to read that something restrictive, but now it strikes me differently. They weren't trying to imprison sacred teaching, they were trying to protect it. Just like you would put a fence around your garden to keep the puppies out of it. They understood that truth entrusted a community could get trampled if left exposed to every passing convenience or political pressure. The fence isn't control, it's care, like putting a trellis around a young vine. Around the same time in history, Heraclitus was describing reality as an ever-living fire, always changing, always moving, but structured by something steady beneath the flicker. If truth is like that, living and moving, then you can't just pin it down like a butterfly in a display case. You have to tend it. Fire warms and illuminates, but it also needs attention. Leave it unattended, and it gutters out or burns everything down. Same with truth. I think about that line in the Gospel of Matthew as well, where Yeshua says, "You have to become like children to enter the kingdom." People sometimes hear that as being innocent or being naive, but I don't think that's it. I think it's about being receptive, open, still growing. Children don't walk around pretending they've got it all figured out. They're constantly taking things in, revising what they thought they knew, reaching for understanding. Truth approached with arrogance gets rigid. Truth approached with that kind of openness stays capable of maturation. The Buddha said something that lands in a similar place. Just as a mother would protect her only child at the risk of her own life, so let one cultivate a boundless love toward all beings. He was talking about compassion, sure, but the analogy sticks. What's precious and living gets guarded differently than what's just an object that we own. You don't protect your child the way you protect your car. One is devotion, the other is maintenance. If truth is alive like that, it can't be left defenseless against the forces that would cheapen it. Convenience, ideology, fear. I notice something when I pay attention to how people actually talk about truth. When it's treated like a finished adult possession, it tends to get wielded like a weapon. But when it's treated like something still growing, it gets handled with patience. You don't scream at a child for not being fully formed yet. You correct, you guide, you protect, and you wait. Ideas that carry moral weight, that shape how we live and how we treat each other, need that same kind of environment. They need honesty and humility around them, or they harden into slogans. They lose their nuance. They start getting deployed in ways that betray whatever depth they once held. The Tao Te Ching has this image of the sage being like a newborn child, not helpless but unforced, flexible, alive in a way that hasn't been corrupted by rigid assumptions yet. That resonates. Vitality and openness are not signs of incompleteness. They are signs of being in rhythm with how reality actually works. So what emerges from all this kind of shift? We're not just seekers of truth, we're caretakers of its development. The responsibility isn't only in finding what seems accurate, but in making sure that what we find gets handled with integrity, communicated carefully, allowed to mature, protected from the forces that would deform it. If I claimed to possess a final truth, I stop nurturing it. I freeze it in whatever form I happen to find it and start demanding that reality conform to that freeze frame. But if I hold it as living, I stay attentive. I watch how it grows in different contexts. I pay attention to how it's expressed, how it's interpreted, how it affects the world around me. Care becomes an intellectual virtue. Protection becomes an ethical task. Looking back through history, so many distortions of truth didn't come from ignorance. They came from impatience, from declaring conclusions final before they were ready. Truth forced into static systems too early loses its capacity to respond to new evidence, new experience, new human suffering. It's like declaring a child fully grown before adolescence. You don't get stability, you don't get fragility dressed up as certainty. To nurture truth, then, is to let it move through stages: discovering, testing, refinement, integration. Each stage needs something different from us. Discovery needs curiosity without trust. Testing needs courage to face contradiction. Refinement needs real dialogue, not just debate, but genuine revision. Integration needs ethical reflection on how this knowledge affects the well-being of others. Truth stops being just cognitive and starts being rational. It shapes communities and gets shaped by them. I find this metaphor also asks for restraint. You can't force a plant to bloom overnight with shouting. You can't rush a child into maturity. Same with truth. When we try to accelerate understanding, we usually end up with oversimplifications that later generations have to untangle. Patience becomes a kind of fidelity, letting truth grow at its own pace, guided by careful attention and ethical concern, rather than weaponizing whatever partial understanding we've grabbed hold of. But the metaphor warns against passivity as well. A garden left unattended doesn't stay pure, it gets overtaken. A child left completely alone doesn't remain innocent, they become vulnerable. Truth left unguarded gets appropriated by whoever has the most power, reshaped to justify whatever needs justifying, diluted until it's just another opinion. Stewardship means discernment. It means preserving nuance. It means refusing to let the language of truth become a mask for domination. So responsibility emerges as the natural next step. Truth is alive. Truth is unfinished. And what lives must be cared for. What evolves must be guided with humility. What shapes human life must be directed towards something beyond just self-interest. I'm starting to see truth like a child. Grows in community. No one holds exclusive guardianship. Traditions, arguments, shared questioning. All of it forms the environment where truth matures. My role isn't to control or to abandon, but to contribute carefully, to question and listen and revise, to protect, the integrity of what's been honestly discerned, without pretending I've got the final word. The unfolding of truth, maybe, invites not triumph but tenderness, vigilance without rigidity, humility without resignation, courage without aggression. If truth is living and developing, then our task isn't to finish it, it's to help it grow rightly, to tend the plant, water the roots, trust the timing, and wait for the flowering that we might not even be the ones to see.